You're one of the great thought leaders about how to be influencing brands and how do we think about brands. And I think the whole concept of swarm theory is something that we've never really had the ability to understand. And we look at social networking and the power of it. It's almost disarming in one respect. But I think where we are right now, we run into the issue of how do we really bottle it? And who's really doing it that can provide the kinds of examples that will provide some guidance as to how to think about this?
Well, I think that's the interesting thing. I mean, when you think about swarm theory, what it's saying is that groups of animals all move at the same time, but nobody leads them. And if you think about the web and you think about how communities interact over the web, they aren't typically being led, but they're all moving.
Right.
And the challenge is how do you then make those communities move towards you? How do you get them to flock? And the challenge is that you can't necessarily just say, do this. That's not how it works. Mm-hmm. They get more information from their peers. So you've got to influence people within that swarm to influence the others. And the ones that seem to be doing it the best are the companies that I think are spending time and effort against doing just that. Now, a large part of it is driven by collaboration.
Right.
Doing programs that are collaborative in nature, getting people to get involved and engaged. I think the other part of it is just doing great creative work that inspires people. And, you can't help but go to YouTube or go to other outlets now to look at great work that people have done. Either they've done themselves as user-generated content, or they've uploaded other work. The interesting thing is that you can go to something like, Bob Lackey this morning showed Swear Jar. Took it from my chance to show it. But what was interesting about that, it must have been uploaded on YouTube 150 times. People, even though it's up there 149 times, feel the need to put it up there again. And I think it's getting the people engaged in the community and involved in a way which brings them closer to your brand, which is really what makes a difference in moving them forward.
Yeah. Well, let's think about the entire marketing supply chain, because we've got the marketers, got the agencies, got the media, and all the other resources that contribute to the creation of a marketing message, whether it's a traditional form, emerging media, or social networks, or whatever. That's a big challenge, is to get everybody pointed in the right direction or in the same direction. Is there a philosophy that you have that would tell us to say, okay, here's how you have to reactivate that marketing supply chain?
Yeah, I would call it co-creativity.
Okay.
I think the process is that you engage all different types of people. Here you go, Bob. All different types of people. For example, within your agency, within your media group, within your own company, with consumers in particular. And it's the combination of all those people together and those ideas and the thinking together which yields the best result. I think the ideas of trying to go off and do it yourself in a world where collaboration drives the best ideas, in my opinion, is wrong. I think the idea of co-creation, the idea of co-creativity, of bringing people from around different disciplines, different ways of living, different parts of the world together generates the best results.
Let's talk about around the world. That's a good question that just came up. He says, how do you apply your swarm analogy to your work to help rebuild the image of the U.S. around the world when the U.S. is clearly seen as the predator rather than the peer?
Yeah. Well, in the case of the U.S., it starts at the top. The scary part about it, not to go off script here a little bit, but one of the biggest swarms is actually Islamic fundamentalism.
Yeah.
And what the internet has allowed that to do in terms of growing and moving. And one of the big challenges that the U.S. government has is to establish a much different image than it currently has overseas, obviously. The problem is that it's not an advertising issue, it's not a PR issue, it's a behavior issue. Mm-hmm. And until the U.S. starts to behave in a way which is consistent with the type of values that other cultures prefer or at least respond to, it's going to be very difficult to do that. I was at a meeting once sorry.
No, it's good.
In Washington, where there was some research that had been done by one of the governmental agencies about, particularly towards Islamic populations, and it was to look at the values that the Islamic population has and holds dear, and their opinion of what our values are. And the scary thing was, if you look at the Islamic population and the values, it's faith, it's family, it's respect, and there's two others. If you look at what their perception is of Americans or America, not necessarily Americans. It is power, money, and so forth. And the scary part is, you take the 5 values they see of America and the 5 values they see of themselves, and not one connects. Not one. So the biggest issue I think America has is, in my opinion, is respecting other cultures, and demonstrating that respect. And we're all ambassadors to that, by the way, because we all travel and we all are out there. And I think, for the most part, Americans do try to do a good job. There's a lot better that we could do ourselves. But it's, I think, more or less a behavior thing.
So if we were to leave the audience with a message with how to get swarm behavior, how do we get our consumers to swarm to our products? What would you leave them
I would
in
leave
terms
it with
of a
this.
message?
I think I watched Steve Ballmer talk this morning about disruption.
Right.
And from a marketing perspective, I only think that's half the battle.
Okay.
I think disrupting people is fine. You've got to make them aware. But then you've got to make them care.
Right.
And care is the engagement side of it. So you can disrupt them all you want, but you've got to get engagement from your consumers. I would say be a consumerist. I would start and end with the consumer. I would live it, breathe it, eat it, whatever. It is the consumer which drives your success. And once you take your eye off that ball, everything else is impossible to put back together.
Thank you for your wonderful insights. Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
Chuck Brymer. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.
Okay.